All right, folks, we're back together to start talking about the second part of the shading that will go with our graph mapping and portraiture assignment we've been working on. This is going to be take 2 because the office is sending out a number of pages today. So that's why I have a little bit done here already, as we already started discussing this once. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to take another shot at it here and hope that the intercom doesn't come on again while we're doing so. So what we were talking about here is how to start getting value, which is a degree of light to dark. This is a value finder. Your value 10 is white, your value 1 is black, and then everything else has an assigned number value to it based off of how light or dark that gray is in relationship to these two colors. These are very helpful. I'll make sure I have one in the Schoology folder to where you can print it off if you want to use it. But what they're used for is I can sit here and I can start to look like here in my darkest areas, I can start to compare this and then look over here and make sure that it's the same. I can look at my helmet up in here. It's about a 5, so that's going to have to be about a 5 there. It helps me start to map out how light or dark everything needs to be. So where I was at here is I started to shade in some of my deeper shadow areas first here, and then I started to pull in a little bit of background just to get rid of all the white in the composition here. So as I work on this background, I'm going to try to make sure that I'm eliminating all of the hard outlines on this picture, because really there isn't a dark line that says helmet stops and ceiling starts. It's a change in value from here to here that we see. So that's what we want in this picture as well. So what I've started doing here is I've went in and I've started shading all my darker areas and just dropping some value into this background here while I'm at it. So I'm going really lightly and I'm keeping my marks moving vertically here for the background so that they read different than some of the curved marks we're going to have later. I'm going to shade right down across the line of that helmet because I don't want to end up with a halo where I shade it out around the helmet here and it looks like the helmet's kind of glowing or has a dark aura to it. So what we're going to do is keep all those marks going the same direction. And then we're going to come back and we're going to clean up this line when we're done. I do as much subtractive drawing with this style of drawing as I do additive, which means pulling away from. Like down through here, if I want this to be a little bit lighter, I'm going to pull down through here and clean this up a little bit. Now, the tools that I'm using today is I've got me a pencil here. I'm using an ebony pencil. It'll get a little bit darker than your normal pencil, but a normal pencil will be fine as long as the relationships are right. If this is the darkest part of the picture, then we're good. If this is the lightest part of the picture, then we're good. So I've got my pencil. I've got a white charcoal pencil, which is basically like a regular white colored pencil, just a little less waxy. I prefer these, but this will work fine. And I have a small controllable eraser here. If you don't have something like that for cleaning into smaller areas and trying to get things that are small in your composition later on, what you're going to want to do is we're going to use that smaller eraser and some of these blending stumps here. So we've got a few different kinds. We've got the solid one here that's been sharpened down to a point. It's just solid compressed paper. We've got the same thing, but it's been rolled kind of at an angle and it's hollow here. I've kind of made my own version of this here just by rolling up a piece of paper and cutting the end off of it where it's nice and compressed, and it works just as well for your blending here. So if you want to take this and start to blend in with this here, it does a really good job of it, and you can use it to start to spread into other areas as well where your value doesn't need to be as dark. So we'll keep these guys on hand. We've got our pencil, eraser, white pencil. All right, so I'm going to continue along here and starting to get some of these values in where they need to be plugged in. I'm just going to look at the shapes and how light or dark they are and start to shade this in. So right up here on this brow where it's darker, I'm going to put some more mark making. You can see that up underneath here is a lot more shadow. This is really what's going to give the three-dimensionality to your drawing, because we've got all our line work on there that defines what that form looks like. But to actually get it to start looking like a 3D form, we have to start shading this guy in. With the eyes over here, we can see that we have this really dark pupil. Now, once you put the eyes in, it starts to look back at you guys. That's when you really can tell where you're at with things a little bit more. I'm going to shade along the edges of the eyeball because they're an ellipse. And then I'm going to take this blending stump and I'm going to pull that out a little bit. Now, if it gets too dark, don't worry about it. We're going to come right back in with our eraser here and pull some of that back out. I'm going to start to look at some of these areas up here on the helmet too. I want to just start to get my big areas before I get too worried about concentrating on those smaller ones yet. I am going to go ahead and get a little bit of eyebrow in here. I can come in with this blending stump. Oh, I'm going to hit my head off the camera there real quick. And I can start to blend some of these areas that I've made darker out to where I'm getting a really subtle gray effect here. We can see how that's starting to define the cheek by getting this darker area down in here. I think I'm going to add a little bit more value in here, just so I can grab it and spread it up. Now on hair, I'm going to do a completely different demo for hair because it's kind of hard unless you know kind of how to go about it. But we're just going to keep shading along here for now. You can see how this is starting to look a lot more like this one over here. And that's the second time I'm going to lean forward and hit the camera with my head. It's all right. Probably not going to hurt much. If I get too dark with my blending stump here, I can just come back in with my eraser and start to pull some of those areas back out. I'll blend that out a little bit again. this other eyeball in here. I'm just looking at the values I see over here in the shapes, and I'm just repeating those, guys. I'm gonna pull a little bit more into this shadow here so that I can start to grab some of that and bring it down into here. Get this guy in here and rip some value into this. See how that nose is starting to pop forward now, because we're starting to get a little bit of value in the sides here. It's starting to bring that forward. You can see how this is starting to develop, how we're starting to get a three-dimensional effect to this now. look at that shape of light right there. How that kind of comes, does that number. Got my blending stump back out here. All right, gonna take the blending stump again and keep working here. And I'm gonna give a little bit of value to everything just by dropping that finger across there. We can always lighten that back out later if we need to. Let's take a look at the lips down here and get a little bit on there. Now I've got my eraser out because I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull a little of this back out. Kind of push my highlights. Give it a more dramatic effect. Another trick I like to use is once I get enough value on here like this, I like to kind of just take from where I've already put it and give everything just a little bit. And then I can come back in with my eraser and pull out where my absolute whites are, which there won't be many. All right, let's get some on the lips here. Your top lip is always going to be a little bit darker than your bottom lip because the top lip cuts in like this and the light comes down and catches it indirectly. And then the bottom lip rolls out like this. So there's a point on that bottom lip where we're always going to have kind of a highlight as well. also going to use this blending stump to give the flesh around the mouth that's peeking out from the beard a little bit of value. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to clean up everywhere that I want to stay bright. Get any fingerprints out of there, and I've already went in and smeared across this just to give it a little bit of value, which allows me to subtractively pull out my brightest areas. All right, so I need to get my strap in here and a few things, but this is really the gist of what we're doing here as far as shading the facial features go. We're gonna start with our darkest areas. We're going to start to get our shapes of light and dark in there. And I am going to come back with a second part of this video. I'm gonna finish this guy up a little bit, get some more in the background here and finish some of my shading down in the buckle and maybe the shirt. But we're gonna get back together again and talk about how to do hair, because hair is its own creature, and we'll talk about that next. But this is where I'm wanting you to go with it next. You're gonna start using your compressed paper, blender, your pencil, and some type of an eraser to start to fill in these spaces after you've pulled your grit out. Give me a holler if you have any questions.